I was just reflecting upon the story of Moses in the Quran, where God, in Surah Taha, one of the chapters of the Quran, where God introduces himself to Moses. So Moses is going through the desert with his family. He sees a fire on the mountain, and he then leaves his family behind and goes up this mountain to see if he can get some guidance from there, some direction. And when he gets up there, he is called. God introduces himself to him, and you can only we can't even begin to imagine how this experience would have been for Moses, because he's in the middle of the night, he's on top of a mountain, it's cold, and he hears a voice, right? If we were to experience something like this would petrify the best of us. And what's interesting is that he goes up to the mountain, God introduces himself, and then God gives him the mission, if you like, or the task of going to Pharaoh and delivering the message to Pharaoh. But before that, a couple of things happen. Now, one thing God does is God gives Moses some miracles. One of the miracles God gives Moses is that of his staff. Now, many of us have heard this story. Even if you're a non-Muslim, I'm sure you've heard this story. Now, what's very interesting is that in the Quran, God asks Moses, "What's in your hand?" He points towards his staff, and Moses said, "This is my staff. I use it for many things. I rely upon it. I depend upon it from the perspective of beating down leaves from the tree, and I have many other uses for it, etc." And at that point, God tells Moses to throw down the staff. Now, as he throws down the staff, that very thing that he relies upon and he depends upon, and he's been relying upon and depending upon for God knows how long, becomes something that he is now absolutely petrified of. It becomes a snake, right? A miracle is taking place right in front of him. And obviously, now, just a point on miracles, sometimes people have an issue with miracles, but I would say, well, hold on a second. If you really understand who God is, that he's the all-powerful being able to do all things, the creator of everything that exists, then there's no problem in him allowing for miracles to take place, where he suspends some of the laws that he has given that govern this our existence, right? It's not an impossibility for God. Nevertheless, a literal miracle takes place in front of him. The staff becomes a snake. Now we can only imagine what's going through Moses' head at this point. This very thing he depends upon and he relies upon, that he has just a moment ago just referred back to and reflected over how he depends upon the stick. He's reflected over the point that all of the uses that he puts the stick to, that very thing that he relies upon has now become something that can kill him in a moment, right? And this is a very big shift. And then God tells him to pick up the snake, right? The very thing that he's running away from, God tells him, well, don't fear it, don't be scared of it, just pick it up, right? Grab it. And then when Moses grabs it, and by the way, I'm paraphrasing this story, so I'd really like you guys to, I'll put the verse number in the description below so you guys can go read it for yourself, the translation of it. But then when Moses picks the snake up, the snake returns to being his staff, right? Now, one thing obviously we learn on the surface is that God has given Moses a miracle to take to Pharaoh, that he can demonstrate to Pharaoh as a sign that he is a prophet of God. But there are some profound lessons in just the way God gave Moses this miracle. Well, one of the lessons we learn is of trust, is of reliance, is of putting your trust and reliance upon the being that is worthy of relying upon and trusting upon. Because what happens for us, from a worldly perspective, for all of us as human beings, we depend upon things. Now, if you don't have God, if you don't believe in God, then you are depending upon and relying upon 101 other things in the world, in your immediate surroundings, people, things, ideas, plans, whatever it may be. We are relying upon things constantly in our lives. But what ends up happening is that the things that we are relying upon are also dependent, right? And they can't really help us. They don't have any intrinsic power to help us, right? They may bring benefit to us, but they don't bring benefit to us because they have some sort of intrinsic value, worth, or power. They are means that God has put in place. But what we learn from this beautiful story, or this narrative where God gives Moses his miracle, is at least one thing we can take from this as a lesson, is that Moses is pointed towards a thing that he depends upon and he relies upon, his staff, right? This is something he uses from a worldly perspective. It's something he depends upon for many things. And God is showing him the thing that you rely upon and depend upon, that very thing, if God wills, can become something that can destroy you in a second. It becomes a snake immediately, right? And then God tells him the reverse, that the thing that can destroy you, this snake that you're afraid of, if God wills, it could return to being something that could become beneficial for you. As he picks it up, it becomes his stuff again. Now we learn a very profound lesson through this, which is that the things that we rely upon and depend upon, they have no intrinsic power. They can't do anything for us in and of themselves. God is the one that has made those things useful for us. Hence, God is the one that we need to rely upon. Yes, we could put our trust in the things that we have around us and we can use them, but we have to always know that God is the one that's made these things useful for us, right? And if he wills, he can remove the utility from them. He can remove the benefits from them. Right? And if he wills this, if there's something that's not beneficial to us, if he wills, that thing could become beneficial for us. The lesson being that we have to put our trust in God. And Moses is taught this lesson through this period or time of receiving this miracle, or during the event of receiving this miracle from God. He's also taught the lesson, which I would say is another miracle, or just the way God teaches us as human beings. And we learn through this event in history the same lesson that Moses learned on the mount at that point, which was, you may rely upon the things in the world, but know that these things have no intrinsic power or worth. It is God who makes them useful for you. So put your ultimate trust in God. Rely upon God. And this is, by the way, the lesson Moses needed at that point, because he was going to be commissioned with a very significant task, which was to be sent to Pharaoh, right? And obviously Moses had escaped from that place for other reasons too, because he killed a man, etc. So there was a lot of reasons, reasons Moses did not want to return to that place. But what he needed to have the strength and confidence to return was this understanding that God is in power and to put your trust in God. And essentially that's what we need to remember and realize today too, in the 21st century. And now I just want to quickly end on just reflecting upon this idea of putting your trust in God. And I want you to just entertain this, even if you're a non-Muslim, you're an atheist, right? You don't believe in God. But I just want you to really reflect over some of the benefits, of putting your trust in God. Right? A lot of the anxieties that we face these days, a lot of the anxiety that we feel, the agitation that we have, the restlessness that we have in our lives is because we are constantly putting our trust in things which we know can let us down at any moment. And we know this through experience. Many times we put trust in people, they let us down. We put our trust in things, those things let us down, right? This causes instability in our lives. It doesn't give us stability. It just puts us on a very shaky ground. Right? And as human beings, we want to find balance. We want to find tranquility and peace and stability, but we can't find this when we rely upon things which are also unstable, just like we are, right? But when you put your trust in God, the all-powerful creator who is able to do all things, who knows everything, who's in control of everything, then this immediately brings stability and balance to the human being. So much so that the human being could do things and achieve things he never could do or achieve before. Right? It removes barriers, right? It removes even mental barriers. When you rely upon yourself, when you trust upon yourself, you know your limitations. And what that does sometimes, it prevents you from doing things that you could potentially do. It makes you, sometimes we put ourselves in a position where we want to do something, but we don't do that thing because we reflect upon our own abilities or lack thereof, and our own limitations, and we think, what, I can't do this because if I try to do this, this may happen. I don't have this skill, I can't do this. And we reflect negatively on the future, and therefore we prevent ourselves from doing a potential thing that we could do just because of our dependence on ourselves, and therefore our realization of our limitations from that perspective. But if you were to put your trust in God and know that He is the one that's able to do all things, if He wills, you can achieve anything, and you can do anything, and you can conquer anything, and you can overcome anything. And if you put your trust in God like that, then you will be able to achieve things and do things you never thought you were able to do before. And it brings balance, and you realize that if something good happens to me, it's because God has allowed it. If something doesn't go my way, it's because God has allowed it not to go my way, and there is good in that for me too. So putting your trust in God, from many perspectives, I've just scratched the surface, it brings balance, it brings tranquility, it brings harmony to a human being. It brings peace of mind to the human being, right? No longer are you on shaky grounds. You're on something very, very strong now, right? Which is trusting in your Creator, and that's it. That's the best you can do, right? And you're in the best of hands, and that's it. That brings absolute clarity and stability and confidence to a human being. So I just wanted to leave you with these thoughts and share just these ideas with you. I know obviously some people may watch this, maybe atheists, may not even believe in God, but I want you to really consider these realities, because a lot of the time what leads us to the truth, which, and from the Islamic perspective, the belief in God is innate, is natural. Every single human being, it's a part of their fitrah. Yes, it may be covered, it may be clouded, but realizing the benefits of believing in God and relying upon Him may awaken that truth within you, right? It's most things we believe in, and I've said this many times before, it's not because we have a rational conviction for those things. We have logical, rational proofs, arguments for that thing. No, most things we believe in and we follow and we do are things that we know to be useful. And it's in the utility that we find the truth, right? Or that we recognize the truth of that thing. So for those that are more open-minded and more broad-minded, I really would like you to reflect upon these things. I'm going to leave some examples of some verses of putting your trust in God, maybe a story from the Quran in the description below, so you can go and reflect over it further. Let me know your thoughts in the comments below regarding putting your trust in God and putting your trust in other than God, and how that can manifest in your life and how that can, change your life from that perspective. I thank you guys for watching. Until next time, take care.